Subscribe now, hit like, and leave a comment. Because once you step inside the story, there's no easy way out. The sirens cut through the night like broken glass. Red and blue lights ricocheted off the concrete as a convoy of federal vehicles tore across the empty stretch of highway outside Florence, Colorado. At 3:12 a.m., the call came in: an inmate breach, possible escape attempt, inside the most secure prison in the United States. ADX Florence was not supposed to have breaches. It was designed to end them. When Special Agent Daniel Mercer arrived, the desert was still holding its breath. ADX Florence rose in the darkness like a fortress carved out of paranoia. Thick concrete walls, razor wire glittering under floodlights, watchtowers unmoving and silent. Mercer had spent 2 decades chasing criminals who thought faster than the law. Terror financiers, organized crime strategists, men who treated prisons like chessboards. ADX was built for people exactly like them. Inside cell block D, guards stood rigid, eyes fixed on a single door. The inmate inside was Elias Crow, a former systems engineer turned criminal mastermind. Convicted of orchestrating violent plots without ever touching a weapon, Crow was known for one thing: he could manipulate anyone who listened. That was why he was here. 23 hours a day in isolation, no contact, no room to plan. But tonight, something had gone wrong. Crow was found unconscious on the floor of his cell, breathing but unresponsive. No signs of a fight. No damage locks. The door had never been opened, according to protocol. That should have been impossible. Mercer knelt beside the doorway, staring through the narrow window as medics worked in silence. The cell was clean. Too clean. No loose items. No blood. No explanation. Warden Ruth Calder met Mercer in the corridor, her face carved from discipline and fatigue. She had overseen ADX for 7 years and believed in its design with near religious certainty. This prison was built to stop the smartest criminals alive, she said quietly. If Crow did this to himself, we'll find out how. If someone helped him, that's a different problem. Mercer began pulling records, architectural plans, surveillance logs, behavioral reports. ADX Florence wasn't just a prison. It was a psychological weapon. Cells angled so inmates couldn't see each other. Windows designed to show only sky, never the ground, to erase a sense of location. Meals passed through slots. Movement choreographed down to the second. The building itself was meant to think faster than the men inside it. Yet Crow had been smiling in the days before the incident. A guard named Luis Moreno had noticed it first. Subtle changes. Crow asking fewer questions. Sitting upright during the single hour of recreation. Staring at the sky like he was counting something. Moreno reported it, but nothing in the system flagged as dangerous. In ADX, silence was considered compliance. Mercer interviewed Moreno in a narrow office lined with monitors. He said one thing. Moreno admitted, voice tight. Just once. He looked at me and said, "This place was built to stop yesterday's criminals." Then he smiled. That sentence lodged in Mercer's mind like a splinter. Digging deeper, Mercer found something buried in construction archives from the 1990s, when ADX was designed after a wave of prison violence shocked the country. The architects had consulted psychologists, military engineers, even behavioral economists. The goal wasn't punishment. It was prevention. Break communication. Eliminate patterns. Outthink manipulation. ADX Florence was supposed to be the end of criminal innovation, but prisons evolve. And so do criminals. A tech audit revealed an anomaly. A maintenance system update had run 3 nights earlier, unauthorized, and signed. The update adjusted internal lighting cycles by milliseconds. Nothing a human would notice. Nothing a standard review would catch. Except Elias Crow had once written code for timing-based encryption systems. He understood how tiny changes created openings. Mercer felt the pressure building. If Crow had found a way to test the prison's limits, others might already be watching. ADX housed men with global influence, people whose words alone could cause chaos if they slipped through the cracks. Then the call came from medical. Crow had regained consciousness. Mercer entered the infirmary, the air sharp with antiseptic. Crow lay restrained, eyes open, calm. Too calm. When Mercer introduced himself, Crow turned his head slightly and spoke in a whisper meant only for him. "They didn't build this place to stop us," Crow said. "They built it to study us." Mercer froze, because tucked inside the medical file was a document he hadn't noticed before, classified, red-stamped, and misfiled under infrastructure costs. A pilot program name stared back at him, one he'd never seen tied to ADX Florence, Behavioral Containment Initiative, and beneath it, a list of inmates marked not for incarceration, but for observation. But when Mercer asked Warden Calder about it, her face went pale, and she said she'd never seen that file in her life. By dawn, ADX Florence had sealed itself tighter than usual. Corridors once filled with routine echoes now carried a sharper silence, the kind that followed secrets being exposed. Agent Daniel Mercer stood in the warden's conference room staring at the projected document. The words Behavioral Containment Initiative burned into his thoughts. Someone had buried it deep enough that even Warden Ruth Calder claimed ignorance. Either she was lying, or the prison had been built around a purpose even its own leadership didn't fully understand. The Elias Crow was placed under constant observation. 2 guards outside his cell at all times, cameras triple-checked. Still, Mercer couldn't shake the feeling that Crow was ahead. Men like him didn't act without leverage. Whatever had happened in that cell was not a breakdown. It was a signal. Mercer tracked down the name at the bottom of the file. Dr. Helen Price, lead behavioral architect. Officially, she had resigned 6 years earlier after budget disputes. Unofficially, she had vanished from federal records. No forwarding address. No retirement file. Just absence. That alone made Mercer uneasy. In his world, people didn't disappear by accident. Security footage from a maintenance update narrowed the timeline. The system change had been initiated from inside the facility, not remotely. That meant access. Someone with clearance. Someone trusted. When Mercer requested a list of staff on duty during the update, one name stood out: Luis Moreno. Moreno had been cooperative, nervous, visibly shaken since Crow collapsed. Mercer brought him back in, this time with the lights dimmed and the monitors off. "I don't think you helped him escape," Mercer said calmly. "I think you helped him prove something." Moreno swallowed hard. He admitted to receiving messages, anonymous, carefully worded, slipped into official channels where they looked like routine memos. They referenced old ADX blueprints, details that weren't public. The messages never asked him to do anything illegal, just small things, confirming schedules, reporting mood changes, nothing that set off alarms. Until the update, "I thought it was a system test," Moreno said. "I swear, I didn't know what it would do." What it did, Mercer realized, was test the prison's response time. Crow had triggered a controlled emergency, forcing ADX to reveal its weaknesses, not in walls or locks, but in people. When Mercer returned to Crow's cell, the inmate was standing, hand behind his back, posture relaxed. "You're looking for Price," Crow said without being asked. She always hated loose ends. Mercer didn't respond. He didn't need to. Crow's smile widened anyway. "She told them this place would fail eventually," Crow continued. "Not because it wasn't strong enough, because it was too perfect. Perfection invites testing." Behind the scenes, Mercer pulled every archive communication tied to Price. Buried among research grants and consulting invoices was a pattern. She had continued submitting behavior reports long after her resignation. Someone had been funding her, quietly, privately, using shell departments that no longer officially existed. That night, another incident hit. An inmate in a different wing collapsed during count. Same symptoms. No physical trauma. No explanation. 2 cases were no longer coincidence. ADX Florence wasn't containing a problem. It was incubating one. Warden Calder finally cracked. Alone with Mercer in her office, she admitted the truth she'd avoided. ADX had been more than a prison. It had been an experiment in absolute control, designed to map criminal cognition under extreme isolation. The goal was prevention, predicting future threats before they happened. The inmates weren't just being held. They were being studied. But the program was shut down, Calder said. At least, that's what we were told. Mercer understood now. Price hadn't stopped the project. She had gone underground with it. And Crow wasn't trying to escape. He was trying to expose it. When Mercer returned to the infirmary, Crow leaned closer to the glass. "You should ask yourself something," he said softly. "If this place was built to stop the smartest criminals, why did they put so many of us in one cage?" Before Mercer could respond, alarms began to sound, low, controlled, different from before. This was an emergency drill. It was a lockdown triggered from outside the prison. And as every door sealed shut at once, Mercer realized the most dangerous intelligence about ADX Florence had never been inside its walls. It had already gotten out. The lockdown froze ADX Florence in a state of suspended breath. Steel doors slammed shut in synchronized waves, sealing cell blocks, corridors, even the infirmary. Outside, the desert wind carried on as if nothing had changed. But inside the most secure prison in America, control had shifted hands. Agent Daniel Mercer stood alone in the monitoring hub as feeds flickered back online one by one. Someone had rerouted command authority, bypassing local overrides with surgical precision. This wasn't a riot or an escape attempt. It was a demonstration. A single message appeared on the central screen. No signature. No demands. Just coordinates. Mercer recognized them immediately. They pointed to a decommissioned federal research site outside Denver, abandoned on paper, but still drawing power from somewhere. If Dr. Helen Price was alive, and Mercer was now certain she was, that was where she'd be hiding. Before Mercer could leave, a final alert flashed. Elias Crow's cell door opened. Guards rushed in, weapons raised, only to find Crow standing calmly inside the threshold, exactly where he was supposed to be. He hadn't moved. He hadn't needed to. The door opening had never been for him. It was for Mercer. "You wanted the truth," Crow said quietly. "Now you're close enough to touch it." Mercer left ADX under a classified escort, racing against a clock no one else seemed to see. At the coordinates, the facility loomed like a relic, concrete, glass, and antennas half swallowed by weeds. Inside, servers hummed softly, alive and very much in use. Files stretched back decades, documenting behavioral manipulation, stress mapping, psychological fracture points. ADX Florence hadn't just been designed to contain criminals. It had been built as a final testing ground. Dr. Price appeared on a live feed as Mercer accessed the core terminal. Older, sharper, completely unafraid. "You think prisons are about punishment," she said. "They're about information. ADX was the cleanest data set we ever had." She explained it without shame. By isolating the most intelligent and dangerous offenders, her team learned how influence moved through silence, how control could be enforced without force, how systems broke not when attacked, but when observed too closely. When the program was officially shut down, Price had taken it private. Governments didn't stop funding it. They just stopped admitting it existed. "And Crow?" Mercer asked. "A collaborator," Price replied. He understood the value of exposure. He didn't collapse. He performed. Mercer realized the twist too late. Crow hadn't been the subject of the experiment. He had been its proof of concept. A criminal smart enough to turn the system against itself, to force transparency where secrecy had reigned. Back at ADX Florence, the lockdown lifted as suddenly as it began. 2 inmates were transferred out within hours, their records sealed. The incidents were officially ruled medical anomalies. No further investigation was announced. Mercer filed his report anyway. It vanished into classified channels, flagged, then buried. Price disappeared again, her facility wiped clean within days. And Crow remained exactly where he was, back in a cell, back in silence. Weeks later, Mercer received a letter with no return address. Inside was a single line written neatly in blue ink. "You asked which prison was the hardest. The answer was never the building." Mercer looked up the next morning to breaking news, scrolling across his screen. A new federal containment facility had been approved, its design described as an evolution in behavioral security. The lead consultant's name was redacted. ADX Florence stood unchanged against the desert sky, a monument to control, its walls still unbroken. But Mercer understood now that the smartest criminals were never stopped by concrete or steel. They were stopped by truth. And truth, once released, was impossible to lock back inside a cell. If the story shook you, stay close. The next one goes even deeper.